This is Jake Adams, CEO at Simplify EDU.
And I'm Danielle Griggs, a tutor coordinator at Simplify EDU, and you're listening to Educators at Heart.
This podcast is for parents and students interested in peering behind the curtain to get to know the authentic journey we're all on as students of life.
Every week, we'll interview a different educator we know so that they can share the unique experiences that have shaped their perspective on the most important things students should know on their journey to higher education. Let's get started. Hey listeners, this week on the podcast, I'm joined by Christine Guerrero, therapist and owner of Family Life Therapy. A USC graduate, Christine has been a practicing clinician since 2017, with experience in the field dating back to 2009. Her expertise centers around working with teens and families who are managing challenges related to mental health or simply needing support with life transitions. After working in both the community with teens and families, as well as the public and private school systems, she is currently running her own therapy practice, Family Life Therapy, where she offers both therapy and parent coaching. I have an insightful conversation with Christine about managing your teens' mental health, and I can't wait for you to hear all that she has to say. So let's jump on in. So Christine, thanks so much for joining us today. It's so wonderful to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here, and thanks for the invite.
Of course. So I guess just kind of to start off here, where are you originally from? Can you tell our listeners?
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like this is always such a funny question to answer, but originally from SoCal, but growing up, we moved all the time. My dad was in the military.
Okay.
So I guess Southern California, Temecula since high school,
Okay.
and then continued on there for college.
Yeah.
And then moved up to the Bay Area.
Okay.
And been there since then.
Awesome. So I guess what kind of sparked your interest in mental health and therapy, landing you in this specific career?
Yeah. I've always had kind of like innate interest in exploring like psychology and mental health, like what makes people tick and work.
Yeah.
And I think in combination with really enjoying deeper level conversations rather than surface level conversations, it just ended up all coming together and like wanting to join this field, right? Like understanding how people are doing, what's really going on beneath the surface. So the path just kept opening, and here we are today.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I too find it just totally fascinating. Obviously, nothing I've explored, but I do certainly think that it's so important and fascinating and really enlightening in a lot of ways. So I'm excited to kind of pick your brain here and kind of get some advice and some tips and some insight that I think is really relevant for everyone, whether you have students or not. So I guess to kind of kick it off, I know, today we're kind of focusing here on like managing your teens' mental health, which I know is obviously something of great importance and something that a lot of our families are trying to navigate. So I guess to kind of start off, it's been stated that we are facing a mental health crisis in the US, and this certainly does not exclude our youth. So I guess from your perspective and your line of work, I'm really curious, how do you feel like we got here?
Yeah. It's so interesting, right? Like if you think about it, like beyond just like our time frame and going like further back, like when I think about this question in a general sense, I feel like it's really about like our expectations on our standards of living. I think like it feels like life is moving too fast a lot of the time, right? Like expectations are too high, technology is growing too quickly, and everything. And so like one of the analogies that I think about when it comes to this question is that like we're running a marathon, right? And like now at this point we're being asked to sprint, but like the mileage is not changing. It's
Wow,
still
that's a good, I like that
22
metaphor.
miles.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I think like what happens when it comes to mental health is people are being pushed beyond their capacity, and that's triggering mental health. And then I would say or people are pushed too long within their capacity. And then
Wow.
that triggers mental health. So, things are becoming more complex on a daily basis. And so the mental load of everything then becomes very exhausting. And that's stress,
Hmm.
and it's hard to get away. So, like, one of the examples that I was thinking of with this question is, you're trying to take a step back, right? Like, you're trying to take a break from
Hmm.
work. So, what do? You plug into your computer, your tablet, your watch, your
Hmm.
phone, right? But when you're doing that as a break, you're still absorbing information and being stimulated in the same way you might for work or other things. So it kind
Yeah.
of begs the question of, like, what kind of break is that then
Hmm.
for you, for your brain, right? Like, for that
Yeah.
cognitive load. So then, from there, right, like, you're even if you're stepping away, you're still worried about, like, being pinged by someone or like,
Hmm.
getting a text on your phone and things like this, right? So it's that anxiety, that overload
Yeah.
that sparks or can be the spark for mental health that can lead to
Hmm.
depression. And so, like, that's coming from an adult perspective. So then when
Hmm.
we think about our youth,
Yeah.
right, from their perspective, things are moving so, so fast. Like, they can't even see
Mm.
the cars flying by them as much or as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that makes total sense. It's like there's never truly an off switch
Mhm.
for anyone, and it is. It's wild to kind of think about, and it's no
Yeah.
wonder we're facing this, I think.
Right. Yeah.
So I guess, like, in focusing on mental health for
Mhm.
teens,
Yeah.
what would you say are some of the strongest contributors to the decline in mental health for like this specific age group?
Mhm. Yeah, so I feel like, I think about the general things,
Hmm.
um, social challenges. A lot of times we talk about how that's stems from social media
Hmm.
and a lot of the feedback that's being given. But then I think sometimes about more of, like, the abstract stuff. So
Okay.
um, I think about, like, how much data teens are getting nowadays that we never used to get, like, maybe within our
Hmm.
own teenage hoods. And so you're getting, like, all of this, like, constant data in to
Hmm.
compare, and then you're comparing yourself to that data,
Right.
and it doesn't always feel good,
Hmm.
like, and oftentimes you're always like, what are you looking for online? You're usually not looking for what you don't want to be or what you don't want to be like. You're
Hmm.
looking for what you're aspiring to. And sometimes these aspirations are really hard to grasp. Like, it's a
Yeah.
really far reach, And it's also presented sometimes in an unrealistic way. Like,
Yeah. Right.
no one is posting all the steps they took to get to that
Hmm.
situation or location or opportunity. They're just
Yeah.
posting the end result. And then our teens absorb that. They just absorb that end result. So then
Hmm.
they're comparing themselves to that, and then that doesn't feel good. So, like, I feel like a good example might be wanting to get into a dream college.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear just generally, like, if we're just focusing less social media and on our community or at our school, we hear 2 or 3 people got into that college, and we're like, oh, wow,
Hmm.
like, that's great. But now when you factor in the availability of data and algorithms sometimes,
Hmm. Right.
you see a video of 10 to 20 people that got into
Yeah.
that college. And now,
Hmm.
instead of comparing yourself to those 2 or 3 people, you're saying, wow, 10 to 20 people got in and I didn't. Like,
Hmm.
that doesn't feel good. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel, it's a skewed perception, because at the end of the day,
Hmm.
like, a lot of people didn't get in, and, some also got in, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so, but our teens are just saying, like, oh, all those people got in and I didn't.
Hmm. It's
And so,
unrealistic, right? It's
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And so that's one thing. And then I thought of, like, a second thing that I also think is very important, which is the idea of immediacy.
Mm.
So, for, when you're 4 or 5, like elementary school, right? Like, you always want it right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as you get older, you realize that can't always happen.
Hmm.
But with our teens, because of, like, the kind of technology and the way things are operating, not just like online social media, but, like, if you think about, like, ordering a package,
Hmm.
like, we're all expecting it to come the next day.
Yeah.
Like, that decreases our patience. So it's like you order something, it arrives.
Mm-hmm.
You post something, you get a like. You apply, you get notified, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as we get older and our responsibilities get more complex, we don't get that immediate gratification and that immediacy, that
Uh-huh.
immediate response and stuff. And so, what that does for our teens is it decreases their tolerance. So, they have then low
Yeah.
frustration tolerance for not getting immediate feedback, immediate results. That immediacy that can lead to poor emotional management, that leads to emotional dysregulation. And now we're starting to tick the boxes for mental health.
Right.
um,
Wow.
and we're not really prepared to manage those like higher level adult things,
Yeah.
responsibilities,
Mm-hmm.
concepts, even. So then I think like, we are putting that creates like low self esteem and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a growing brain.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
right. I mean, it is wild. I don't have
mhm.
teenagers. I have young kids,
Yeah,
and
same.
just even seeing that. I mean, we went to a hotel recently, and
Mhm.
my small kids who are used to being able to stream whatever they want at any time were so confused by the concept of cable TV that
Yeah.
like they can't know that what is on is what is on, and it just
Right.
you can see it just these young ages, just this
Hmm.
that it yeah, you're right, like, as at a young kid, that is a common thing, but it didn't seem to ever really go away, and it's getting stronger, and I can see
Right.
that even in myself, like, as an adult struggling with that, so it's
Totally.
no wonder.
Yeah.
So to kind of flush that out a little bit more, so talking about the pressures that our teens face today,
Mhm.
I guess what are some of the pressures that are you're seeing on this age group that maybe previous generations didn't have to face?
Yeah.
We kind of talked a little bit about that there, but
Mhm.
maybe anything else, because things
Yeah.
clearly have changed and so quickly.
Right, yeah. So I feel like so that your very first question was more of like a broader perspective, and then like looking at like maybe more smaller specific components, the comparison, the immediacy. And
Yeah.
then like for this question, if I pull it back out to that broader
Hmm.
perspective, I think about how our teens are expected to kind of live more like adult-like lifestyles.
Oh, yeah.
They're kind of so like what I was thinking about this, I'm like, okay, oftentimes like we're taking our teens to like Starbucks, but like they're
Hmm.
not getting chocolate milk. Like they're,
Right.
they're not
Yeah.
going there for that. I had a session with a teen and she was like, oh yeah, like I had to like make coffee.
Hmm.
Um, and for me growing up, like it would be on even as a teen unheard of for me to put on a pot of
Right.
coffee for myself.
Hmm.
So then I think like, okay, this applies to like more categories than a beverage. It's like that concept. Coffee is an adult thing. We drink our
Hmm.
coffee so we could get going in the morning, but now our teens are doing that.
Hmm.
Right? This extends to like what we expect when it comes to performance, our teens'
Mm.
performance, or even their emotional regulation, right?
Right.
Like we're forgetting that they're kids, they're
Hmm.
young, they're developing, they're figuring it out. They don't know.
Yeah.
And then like we're doing all of these things, going back to like the brain with the same brain that we grew up with, give or take,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
evolution wise, like
Yeah.
they
Right.
don't have like an upgraded system by any means
Yeah.
from when we grew up, but they have higher expectations. They have expected to move at a faster pace.
Hmm.
They're brought along on these maybe emotional journeys where they're expected to have more regulation and more
Yeah.
things because we all have advanced in these concepts, but we're still working with like, a very old circuit system.
Yeah. Yeah. That I mean that's fascinating. So I guess how do, we as parents or
Mhm.
educators or just adults in general
Yeah.
help students navigate and manage those pressures before they become too much?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the number one thing, if we're saying things are moving too fast, I feel like the natural answer is to support allowance for it to slow down.
Ooh, that's good.
Um, like it's in all categories. So it's like if we see that a kid is frustrated, like having patience for that and helping them break down what they're feeling and why they're
Mhm.
feeling that, and helping them, especially as teens, understand those concepts that are there around having patience and like, well, there's a couple steps that we missed to get to this goal. Like we know you
Mhm.
really want to reach it, but this is the work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
How can we help you? So I think it's just about slowing everything down. Sometimes for families at home, it's the kid is like, well, I don't want to go to that practice,
Mhm. Right.
And like it could be okay to explain, okay, well, we do have to go, but like this one time, let's not. And
Mm.
let's talk about why not. And let's talk about like
Yeah.
what we can do next time when you don't want to go, but it's something we still have to do.
Mhm.
Right. Just allowing for a little bit of breathing room for our kids.
Yeah.
Um, and everything there. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. Um, so talking about school specifically,
Mhm.
what are some school specific stressors that students and teenagers are facing today?
Mhm.
And how are you seeing those impacting their mental health?
Yeah. So when it comes to school stressors, I mean, school is overall the same ish,
Mhm.
right?
You're
In the
right.
sense of like we're going to school, we're doing our work, we're getting our grades, we're managing
Right.
social things. Um, and again, I think sometimes like those stressors are about maybe parents or even students forgetting about the smaller details. Like,
Mm.
I'm stressed out because I have to switch classes every hour and readjust to a
Mhm.
new classroom dynamic.
Yeah.
I'm stressed out because I'm a teen and I have to wake up at like 6:30 a.m. to
Yep,
get to
yep.
school, and that is against the grain of
Yep.
my teenage biology.
Mhm.
And so there are some brand new things, of course, to deal with in school. Social
Mhm.
media and how that
Yeah.
impacts schools. Different types of bullying is happening nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Like online text, group text, like,
Mhm.
and things like that. And of course, those are all there
Yeah.
and those are new. But again, I think like going back to the core is really important, and recognizing that as teens are facing this new world, they're also still facing the same stressors that have always been there at the same
Yeah.
time. And that can then, that like compound then really affects mental health.
Mhm. How do you think that parents can help them manage this, like
Mhm.
manage these stressors, these school specific related
Mhm.
stressors? Like, what's some advice for parents? What can they do?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think with school specific stressors, right, like being able to talk to their kids around what's going on.
Right.
Um, it's just all, I think it's all about communication at that point.
Hmm.
Parents finding a way to think, what opens the door to communication with my child so that I know how I can support them.
Hmm.
Active listening, validation of feelings. Like once you can have fruitful conversations where your child is heard, then I think you'll find the answers to what you can do to support your child in that school environment,
Mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
instead of just stepping into the school environment and surpassing your child's voice in that,
Right.
stop checking in first and then saying, "Oh, okay, like you don't want me to go straight to the principal about this, but you are okay if I talk to your teacher about this."
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And then you can like make those moves and then support your child and like talking to them, okay, well, we talked to the teacher, so now it is principal time,
Hmm.
or however that looks. So I think like that's what I think of when, even though it is not directly school related, of course, you can support your child in getting tutoring services,
Hmm.
getting involved in clubs at school and things like that.
Yeah.
But from a mental health perspective, it usually just starts with figuring out how to gain access to open communication so your
Hmm.
child feels supported by your actions versus
Right.
burdened or another obstacle that they might have to face.
Mm. For sure. So you've mentioned that you love helping students that are transitioning into college, young
Mhm.
adult life, kind of that whole
Yeah.
phase and figuring it out, what that kind of means to them.
Yeah.
So can you share more about this?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
It's I think it's like so exciting and so stressful at the same
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
And I think that like we have a societal image that it is just like this really easy time of life where
Mhm.
every college bound kid or dorm bound kid is just ready to go and they're excited and they're going
Mhm.
to buy those sheets and you
Yeah.
know um and I think that like sometimes we forget how stressful it is for a child to move out by themselves
Yeah.
and be self-sufficient and navigate all of these things that they really haven't had to do too much on their own, while at
Mhm.
the same time keeping up socials, while at the same time, keeping up academia.
Yeah.
College classes are different than high school classes,
Mhm.
all these things. And so I think it is a very important transition.
Yeah.
You have your teens, like they're like, I'm gonna do it all on my own. I'm independent.
Yeah.
I'm an
Right.
adult now, you know?
Yep.
Uh, but like they still need help. And so it's like,
Mhm.
how can the parents like again provide that support without parenting their young adult?
Yeah.
And what does that mean? uh,
Right.
yeah, so
Um, what would you say maybe that parents, because that is so tricky. I mean, I just even recalling, because I've not had to walk through this
mhm.
yet with my own
Yeah,
kids, but just recalling I can just so
yeah.
vividly remember that feeling of like
Mhm.
the role of the parent shifts so suddenly,
It does.
and I guess how, I don't know, what would you say parents can kind of do to help support their kids in this phase?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other component sometimes, right, when you think of like how can parents support, it's not always about like what I can do for my child, but how I can manage myself and my
Mm,
own feelings. It's so easy as parents to live vicariously through our children.
yeah.
And so this being a very important phase,
Hmm.
sometimes like you want to step into it within your own image.
Mm,
And so I think like for parents, it could be helpful to see if they can take themselves out of it and really focus on what their child, their young adult is telling them they want and they
yeah.
need versus going back into that parenting mode of saying like, no, this is what you want, this is what you need,
Mm.
because it's from your image of how you think it should be.
Wow. That's excellent. That's really good advice. I love that.
Yeah.
And a hard shift, like
Hard.
I would say probably something that doesn't come naturally. So
Yeah,
you
like
have to kind of make yourself
yeah,
go that route.
this is an easier said than done
Yeah.
situation.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's excellent. So I guess just kind of in general, like for
Mhm.
parents who are looking for ways to help support and navigate their students' mental health,
Mhm.
what would you say is maybe kind of that most important takeaway that you could offer for parents who maybe just feel really overwhelmed at tackling this area and just don't know where to start? Maybe they already see their student is
Mhm.
struggling, or just I guess
Yeah.
what could you share?
Yeah, I think the first thing with that is to obviously actively listen to this, but
Hmm.
you see what's happening, right? Like to your point, this parent, they see that their child is struggling.
Yeah.
Um, Therapeutic support is always an option.
Mhm.
I think thankfully the taboos around that have lifted a bit,
Yes. Mhm.
especially for our youth, where they're more open, wanting
Mhm.
therapy, like the concept of like that confidential space where
Yeah.
mom and dad can't get in it,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
they really like that and seek that sometimes. And then I think also like thinking about what is making them struggle, right? If it's
Mhm.
social things that they're struggling with at school, consider maybe getting them involved in something outside of school.
Mm.
One thing that I like to say is that even if your child's struggling socially in school, it doesn't mean that if you put them like in an art class or a sport, something outside of school, they're going to have the same experience.
Yeah.
And that can make a big difference knowing that they have another social outlet that is successful or does feel good when they
Mm-hmm.
go into school in a social outlet that's not feeling good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, so just like what category are they struggling in, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is the trigger that's causing those struggles? And if it's not therapy, it's seeing how you can support or rearrange or get encourage involvement
Mm-hmm.
that can help alleviate, relieve, or manage those feelings.
Yeah, that's huge. Wow. And kind of like to your point, I think we've mentioned a lot of all the things that maybe have gotten worse, but I would say that maybe one thing that has gotten better that's so encouraging is like those stigmas around
Yeah.
therapy and needing help. Like that
Mhm,
has improved so greatly, and to see
mhm.
like that had a very different, just a different reaction when I was growing up to now. Like it is being embraced, and I just
Mhm.
think that's so incredible.
Yeah.
And definitely a good thing, as like I said, as
Yeah.
we've noted so many things that maybe went in the other direction.
Sure, yeah. But also I think like too, like for the first question of like, mental health decline, I think a good thing to think about to your point is that it could be a decline, but it also just could be like a rearrangement of numbers, right?
Right,
Like
yeah.
now we're understanding these mental health concepts, so people are
Mhm.
marking yes to anxiety. They're not just
Right.
nervous.
Wow, yeah, that's an excellent point, right? It's just people
Mhm.
are more aware of it. So maybe
Yeah.
it was always there, we just pretended like it didn't exist.
Yeah, 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 we had no clue.
Wow. Well, Christine, this has been so excellent. I just so encouraging, so many wonderful, things to share, and
Mhm.
for our families to really, I think, implement and learn from. So I guess just can you tell us how can our audience find you and kind of follow the work that you're doing?
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I do have a practice. It's called Family Life Therapy, and that is our web domain, www, and everything. So you can go
Okay.
on there. There's a contact sheet if you wanted to reach out. And even if it's just for a consult, we do offer
Yeah.
a free 30-minute consult for anybody
Awesome.
that's wanting to reach out, as well as just like one-off parent coachings. If you're like, oh,
Hmm.
I want more than 30 minutes, but if my
Yeah.
question's a bit longer than that, it doesn't have to be like the
Hmm.
full-blown therapy commitment.
Yeah.
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 Awesome. Well, that's excellent. Thank you so much. And listeners, I will have all this in the show notes for us as well, so that you guys know exactly where to find Christine, and what an incredible resource for families. So thank you. Well, before we kind of wrap up, we always ask our guests to kind of share their simplified lessons, which is
Mhm.
basically like, if asking you if you wouldn't mind sharing maybe one or two of the most important lessons that you've
Mhm.
had to learn in your own life as a
Yeah.
student of life,
Mhm. Uh-huh.
that you just wouldn't mind sharing to kind of help our audience and help those who are listening maybe learn it a little quicker.
Yeah. Okay, so this is what comes to mind like right now. Like, so I think like there's one motto, like one little saying that I always try to remind myself of, and I think it's helpful to both address procrastination as well as perfectionism.
Mm,
And I think of it, what I always tell myself is like something is better than nothing.
yeah.
And so like whether I'm like procrastinating on something, like if it's just like, okay, I popped up the window on the computer for the browser for what I needed to do.
Hmm.
Or like with perfectionism, right? Like I'm like, okay, like I have to do just a little bit of something, even if it's not like the full thing.
Hmm.
Something's better than nothing. Like just getting like that initial small start can really be the spark to allow yourself to then get the task done or
Mm.
do what you are hoping you can get done, whatever it is. So,
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, thank you so much,
yeah.
Christine. Thanks again for joining me today. I know that I thoroughly enjoyed this. I know our listeners will, and so I just really appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is it's fun to do.
Thanks so much for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe to our show for future episodes. See you next time.